Welcome to StoryVerse, where stories speak and you learn English naturally. Chapter 1. The Invitation. Mary had never been invited to a party before. For 17 years, her life had revolved around the creaking wooden fences of her father's small Irish farm, the bleating of sheep in the early hours, and the soft hum of wind rolling across the empty fields. The world beyond those fields always felt like a dream, something distant, beautiful, and unreachable. But that morning, as she fetched water from the well, something fluttered to her feet. A small cream-colored envelope carried by the breeze as if it were meant for her. Her name was written across it in elegant cursive, Miss Mary O'Donnell. Her heart jumped. Someone had written to her. Inside was an invitation, delicate, perfumed, and sealed with a golden crest. It was for the O'Connors' annual winter ball at the grand estate in town, the kind of event she had only heard about in whispers, the kind where the girls wore silk dresses and laughter echoed beneath chandeliers. Mary read the lines again and again, her hands trembling. She could hardly believe it. No one from town ever invited the farm girl, the one with muddy boots and freckles across her nose. But there it was, in black ink and perfect handwriting. That evening she sat by the fire, staring into the flames as her father mended his boots. "Pa," she began softly, "they've invited me to the O'Connors' ball." He looked up, his tired eyes narrowing. "A ball? What business do they have with us?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but I want to go." He sighed heavily, setting the boots aside. "You've work here, Mary. Parties and dances, those are for folks with time to waste. The O'Connors, they're not our kind." His words stung, but she said nothing more. When he went to bed, she took out the letter again, tracing each word as if it were written in light. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, chosen. The next day she visited old Mrs. Kelly at the edge of the village, hoping to borrow a dress. The widow smiled when she saw the invitation. "Oh, child," she said, brushing Mary's hair aside, "you'll be the prettiest thing there. But remember, the O'Connors are peculiar folk. Not all who dance in their halls come home the same." Mary laughed softly, though unease pricked at her heart. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Kelly. It's just one night." That night, under a pale moon, she laid out the borrowed gown, white with faint blue threads that shimmered like frost. Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked nothing like the farm girl she had always been. Her eyes seemed brighter, her smile softer. For the first time she saw a young woman who might belong in a place of music and lights. As the carriage arrived from town, she stepped out into the chill night air. The driver tipped his hat, and the horses snorted, their breath white in the cold. The farm behind her stood silent, the windows dark. For a moment she hesitated. Then, clutching her small purse, she climbed aboard. The road to the O'Connor estate wound through miles of mist-covered moor. The moonlight glimmered on the marshes, and shadows shifted among the reeds. The driver said nothing, only stared ahead, his eyes fixed on the dark path. As they neared the gates, Mary leaned forward. The estate loomed before her, vast and gleaming, every window ablaze with golden light. Music drifted through the air, soft and haunting. Her heart raced. It felt like stepping into another world, one she had dreamed of, but never believed she would touch. She didn't know then that the night awaiting her would change everything, and that some invitations should never be accepted. Chapter 2. The Girl in the Black Dress. The commercial hotel stood like a palace in the center of town, its tall windows glowing with warm golden light, its grand doors swinging open and shut as laughter spilled into the street. Mary stepped out of the carriage, her gloved hands trembling slightly. She had never seen so many lights, so many people dressed in fine clothes. For a moment, she simply stood there, her breath visible in the cold air, her eyes wide with wonder. Then she took a small step forward, and the music reached her ears. Violins, pianos, voices blending in soft delight. Her heart began to flutter, not with fear, but with a strange, fragile excitement. Inside, the ballroom was alive with movement, skirts twirling, shoes gliding, crystal glasses clinking. The air smelled of perfume, wine, and something faintly sweet like roses. Mary hesitated by the door, clutching her small purse, feeling as if every eye could see she didn't belong. A group of girls near the table turned to look at her. They were dressed in bright silks and jewels, their hair perfectly curled. One of them whispered something behind a fan, and the others laughed, soft but sharp, like the snap of cold air. Mary lowered her eyes, pretending not to notice. She smoothed her borrowed gown, wishing it didn't look so simple next to theirs. "Can I take your cloak, miss?" a young waiter asked kindly. She nodded and handed it over, grateful for his gentle tone. And then she saw him, John Rowland. He was standing near the fireplace, tall and graceful, his dark hair shining under the chandelier. She remembered him from the harvest market last summer, the way he had helped her father load hay onto the cart, the way his smile had lingered just a second longer than politeness required. That memory had stayed with her through countless quiet evenings on the farm. For weeks she had imagined meeting him again, imagined what she might say, how he might look at her. Now here he was, so close she could almost reach out and touch him. But before she could take a step, another girl approached him. She was dressed in black satin, her gown elegant and gleaming, her hair pinned with tiny white pearls. She laughed softly at something John said and placed her hand on his arm. The gesture was natural, familiar, and final. Mary froze. Her heart, which had been fluttering with hope, began to sink slowly, painfully. She tried to smile, tried to pretend she was only an observer, but the weight of disappointment pressed against her chest. The laughter of the town girls nearby seemed louder now, echoing through her thoughts. When John's eyes briefly met hers across the room, there was a flicker of recognition, or was it pity? He gave a polite nod, then turned back to the girl in the black dress. Mary's throat tightened. The warmth of the ballroom suddenly felt suffocating. She turned away and walked toward the veranda, where the cool night air swept through the open doors. The sound of music followed her like a fading dream. Outside, she leaned against the railing, staring out at the dark street below. The snow had begun to fall, light, slow flakes that vanished on contact with the warm ground. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment she thought of her father, sitting alone by the fire, the steady rhythm of the clock marking another quiet night. She thought of how foolish she must look now, the farm girl who believed she could fit among them. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "First time at the O'Connor ball?" Mary turned. It was the same girl in the black dress. Up close, her beauty was almost unsettling, sharp, flawless, and cold. "Yes," Mary said softly. "It's my first." The girl smiled, though her eyes did not. "Then you should be careful what you wish for, Mary O'Donnell. Not every dance here is meant for the living." Mary stared at her, confused, but before she could ask what she meant, the girl turned and disappeared back into the light of the ballroom, leaving behind only the faint scent of roses and something colder, something that felt like warning. Chapter 3. The Party. The night grew louder. The once graceful music had turned wild, spinning faster with every glass poured and every careless laugh that echoed off the ballroom walls. The polished floor glimmered under the lights, and yet to Mary it all began to look distorted, as if the world around her was a dream starting to slip. She sat quietly at the edge of the room, her untouched drink resting on the table. Around her, men shouted for another round, women giggled too loudly, and the air was thick with perfume and smoke. The party had lost its charm. What had begun as elegance had turned into something darker, something almost desperate. She glanced toward the fireplace where John still stood. He was laughing now, his arm around a friend's shoulder, his attention completely elsewhere. The girl in the black dress was gone, and for some reason that made Mary feel even more uneasy. "Why so serious, country girl?" The voice came from behind her. She turned to see a tall man with sharp features and an unsteady grin. His hair was slicked back, his collar open, and his eyes glinted like a man who'd had too much to drink. I'm fine, thank you," Mary said softly. He leaned closer, ignoring the polite distance. "Name's Ull," he said, "and you're far too pretty to be sitting alone." Mary forced a small smile. "I was just leaving." But Ull laughed, catching her wrist before she could stand. His grip was rough. "Don't go yet," he said. "The night's just beginning." The smell of whiskey hung heavy on his breath. Mary pulled her hand away, her voice trembling. "Please let me go." For a moment his grin faded. Then, with a mocking bow, he released her. "As you wish," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "The little farm girl has manners, I see." The laughter that followed wasn't his alone. A few others nearby had turned to watch, whispering, smirking. Mary's face burned with shame. She wanted to run, but her legs felt weak, her heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. She stumbled toward the hallway, searching for the cloakroom anywhere to hide. But even in the corridor, the laughter followed. Distant now, but still cruel. She pressed her hands to her face, fighting back tears. Then, from the far end of the hall, came a sound, faint, like someone humming an old tune. It was soft, almost tender. Mary lowered her hands and looked up. There, near the stairway, stood the girl in the black dress. "You shouldn't wander off alone," the girl said calmly. "There are worse things than men like Ull in this house tonight." Mary blinked, unsure if she had heard her correctly. "What do you mean?" The girl tilted her head, her dark eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Didn't anyone tell you? The commercial hotel was built over an old graveyard. They say when the music plays too long, some of the dead join the dance." Mary tried to laugh, but her throat was too dry. "That's not funny." The girl smiled faintly. "No, it isn't." And before Mary could say another word, the girl turned and descended the staircase, her steps soundless, her shadow long and thin against the wall. When Mary finally returned to the ballroom, something felt different. The air had turned colder, the music had changed again, slower now, softer, almost mournful. And as she looked across the crowd, she saw Ul again, standing near the door, talking to someone unseen. For a brief moment, she thought he was speaking to the girl in the black dress. But when she blinked, there was no one there. The chandelier flickered, the music paused, a glass fell and shattered, and Mary, clutching her trembling hands, suddenly wished more than anything to be back home, back in the quiet safety of her father's farmhouse, where the only sounds were wind and firelight. But the night wasn't over yet, not even close. Chapter 4. Frost and Silence. The morning after felt unreal, like the world itself had been washed clean, leaving only the silence behind. The fields lay under a pale blanket of frost, glistening like crushed glass beneath the faint winter sun. Mary walked slowly along the winding road that led home, her shoes damp, her breath visible in the cold air. The party felt far away now, like something that had happened to someone else. The laughter, the music, the faces, they were all fading, dissolving into the chill of morning. But one thing remained, a hollow stillness inside her. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, a kind of knowing. Her thin coat did little against the cold, but she didn't shiver. Her body moved out of habit, her thoughts drifting somewhere between the earth and sky. She remembered the way the candles flickered at the commercial hotel, how the girl in the black dress had vanished like smoke, how Ul's grin had disappeared when the music stopped. It was as if the night had swallowed part of her, and yet, in a strange way, she didn't want it back. The frost crackled beneath her shoes. The town had long disappeared behind her, and all that remained ahead was the open road and the lonely farmhouse standing at the edge of the hill. The smoke from its chimney rose faintly, curling into the pale blue morning. She paused for a moment, watching it. That little white house, her home, looked smaller than she remembered. Fragile, almost, sitting there against the endless sky. But it was waiting, still standing, still hers. For a long while, she didn't move. She just stood there, breathing in the cold air, letting it sting her lungs and clear her thoughts. She thought of her father, who would be milking the cows by now, unaware of the night she'd had, unaware of the way the world had shifted for his daughter. He would ask how the party went, and she would smile. She would tell him it was fine, because that was easier than explaining how the light of that world had burned too bright, how its laughter had cut too deep. As she started walking again, she noticed her reflection in a puddle of ice. The girl who looked back wasn't the same one who'd left home last night. Her eyes were calmer now, her expression quieter. Not older, just different. There was a kind of peace in her face, though it came from something painful, the peace of someone who had seen how cruel beauty could be, and yet still chose to keep walking. When she reached the gate of the farm, she stopped once more. The frost had turned the grass white, and every fence post glittered like it had been dusted with sugar. The cows were huddled near the barn, their breath rising like little clouds. Somewhere inside, she heard the clatter of a kettle, the sound of home, warm and steady. Mary opened the gate, the metal cold against her fingers. As she walked toward the door, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not joy, not sorrow, but a quiet acceptance. Life would go on, the frost would melt, and whatever had changed inside her would stay, hidden but real, like a scar the heart learns to carry. At the doorstep, She turned once more to look at the horizon. The sun was rising now, its light soft and golden, stretching over the frozen fields. For a brief moment it touched her face, and she smiled. The night had taken something from her, yes, but it had also left her with something else, a strange calm, a strength she didn't know she possessed. Mary stepped inside. The door closed gently behind her, and outside, in the white silence of morning, the frost shimmered, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for her to begin again.